Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Budd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Quarles, good to see you again. Again, thank you for your hard work. I want to start with CECL, or the current expected credit loss, and discuss that a little bit. I think my colleague, Mr. Hill from Arkansas, mentioned that just a few moments ago. But you've said in the past that regulators seem to agree that in times of stress, that the CECL accounting standard will add pro-cyclicality to the banking system. So I know that regulators have proposed phasing in over 3 years the regulatory capital impact at the time of adoption. However, due to the increased pro-cyclicality, in my view, the phase-in would have little effect if the economy goes into a slowdown shortly after it were to be adopted. So can you tell us, is there any consideration being given to an ongoing add back to regulatory capital for the impact of CECL until this new regime, one that is CECL responsive, can be agreed upon? And if so, how long do you think it'll take to finalize a capital plan like that?
So there's not a concrete plan to have an interim capital add back to account for CECL. But obviously we are looking at during this phase-in period, and one reason for the long phase-in period is for us to consider what responses there ought to be, for us to see how CECL operates in practice, and then to consider whether there ought to be a response. If we saw that there was a negative effect that we saw happening more quickly than during this phase-in period, perhaps because of changes in the macroeconomy, then we would accelerate what it is that we were doing.
Okay, or slow it down depending on what would be needed.
Right.
Okay. So I want to switch over now to a smaller part of your portfolio, insurance oversight. And I know that you have extensive knowledge of the way that the international standard setting and regulatory cooperation is done. And I know that you're familiar with the concept of mutual recognition. One of the areas where a large bipartisan majority of this committee is trying to achieve mutual recognition is for our state-based insurance regulatory system with the IAIS on their development of an international capital standard, ICS. The IAIS, through both of their actions and words, has repeatedly made it clear that their goal is to force changes to the entire U.S. state-based insurance regulatory system to make our insurance solvency regime look exactly like Europe's through Solvency II. I find this unacceptable for our U.S. insurance consumers, our markets, and our industries. So in a publicly released document from the IAIS detailing an agreement reached in Kuala Lumpur, and this was in November 2017, the IAIS proclaims that the base parameters of the ICS are going to be Eurocentric. The release also does leave the door open to having the U.S. system formally recognized by the IAIS. But numerous statements from them and their officials make it clear that is not their goal, and that their end goal is to, in fact, force significant changes to the U.S. system. So my question is this: will you commit to us today to stand up to European members of the IAIS who are attempting to use that forum to force us to adopt their system? I'll let you. That was a long question, so I'll let you give you a few moments.
So the Fed, in its which sits on the IAIS, as you know, has been working very closely with the state regulators, so-called Team USA approach, in ensuring that the building block approach to capital, which reflects the U.S. system, is accepted in the IAIS, and I think that is. I actually think that process is working reasonably well. The reports that I get from our delegation are that while it is a process that the IAIS is that they're reasonably happy with how that's proceeding. In any event, we're very committed to it, and we're working with the state regulators on it, and certainly that's not over.
I want to add just another piece to that question. So would you commit today that you will not allow the Federal Reserve to be part of any final agreement on the ICS that does not formally recognize the U.S. system of insurance regulation, one that's worked well for us for the last 150 years?
I mean, we certainly wouldn't have the ability to commit to anything that would change our domestic insurance system at all. So,
Okay. Chairman, my time has nearly expired. I yield back.